Our God is the only God who knows pain and suffering to its fullest. All the other gods of man's mythology live above it. They don't take part in it. They never condescend, but our God condescended and was humiliated, lived in humiliation, and so he gets what you go through. He understands. He's been through the humiliation of the human life. He knows suffering to its entirety. Jesus, from this Thursday that we looked at last week, on to the cross, on to that Sunday morning until he rose again, understood physical pain. We often focus on the pain of the cross, and we should. Jesus' beatings began in the garden. If you remember, Jesus was praying and he's sweating and he is sorrowful even unto death. And then as soon as Judas comes and gives him the kiss of betrayal, and says, that is the man. And as soon as Jesus steps forward and says that I'm the one that you're looking for, he begins to receive many hits from the mob. They begin to take those swords and those clubs and beat Jesus. And then they take him to 3 different false trials. Trials where he comes under trial, and there we see him beat again by a crowd. When Jesus stands up and says, I am the Son of Man, a riot ensues, and they begin to beat Jesus, and they put a cloth over his head and begin to punch him and say, prophesy, who hit you? Can you imagine that? Have you ever been hit before? Have you ever been punched before? I got punched one time from behind as I was in a fight, on a playground fight, in the back of my skull, and all I heard was ringing, and I was out. It hurts bad. Jesus was hit over and over and over again. That would be enough for most of us. Probably all of us. And yet Jesus received everything. He drank up the whole cup. And he went on through 3 false trials. Eventually, he would be flogged, and they would use the cat o' nine tails on him that had iron in it and pieces of metal in it, and it was designed to rip him to shreds. Literally, bone exposed. And Jesus went through that flogging, and it still wasn't over. Then the soldiers took him and draped him in a fake king's robe, fashioned a crown of thorns, and beat it onto his head. But it still wasn't over. Jesus then was given a 100-pound crossbeam put around his shoulders that was probably used to execute other criminals as well, with their flesh still on it, their blood still on it, their waste still on it, and they put it on his back. And they made him carry it to Calvary. And we're told in the scriptures that Jesus didn't make it. He physically could not make it. If you ever had a guess as to whether Jesus went through pain, you can see he went through pain physically. And he carried that crossbeam all the way through the streets, and they took the longest route possible so that everyone in Jerusalem could see what was happening to this criminal. And when he got there, they would lay him down on that crossbeam. They would drive spikes through his wrists, tie him up to the cross, hoist it up onto the center beam, on a beam where other criminals had already died. And Jesus would be there for hours and hours and hours. And as Jesus was there, he would try to pull himself up the way any other human being would. And every time he would breathe, he would pull himself up. And every time he would pull himself up, all the nerves, starting with his hands and in his feet, would cause unbearable pain. Jesus knew physical pain. He understood every last drop of the physical pain of the cross. But that wasn't the only pain that Jesus went through. Jesus went through emotional and psychological pain. Many of you have been betrayed by friends, by family members. You know what that's like. You know what it's like when somebody slanders you, when somebody brings false accusations against you, when somebody doesn't give you the benefit of the doubt. You know what that's like. Jesus, as he's going through this pain, watched as his disciples left. The last one to leave in the garden was naked. He watched how desperate they were to get away from this pain and this suffering. So Jesus didn't just face the physical pain of the cross, but the emotional pain and the psychological pain of betrayal. Jesus went through those false trials, and he said nothing. Jesus went through spiritual pain. Many of us have been through spiritual pain. When you're just asking God why. When you are asking about God's intent. Why would God put me through this trial? Why would God do this to me? Why would God plan this out? Why doesn't God stop it? And you pray. And you ask God to take the cup from you, and you hear nothing. You don't hear no, you don't hear yes, you don't hear maybe, you hear nothing. And that's spiritual pain, and you wonder, has God abandoned me? Is God still with me? And through that questioning is intense spiritual pain. Jesus went through the most intense spiritual pain anyone could ever go through. Why? Because he bore the sins of the world. He took that cup and he drank it. You see, before history even began, the Son of God covenanted with God the Father. God the Father agreed to choose his people, to elect them. And God the Son agreed to give his life and to provide redemption. That was the plan. And when Jesus came to earth and the cup was before him, he heard, there's no change in plan, son. And so he suffered intense spiritual pain. He went through it physically. He went through it emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. What we're going to learn from these verses this morning is that God himself, John 1:1 tells us that in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, that the Word came down and made his dwelling among us, so that we might be able to see and experience and understand grace and peace upon peace upon peace. And so God himself went into the depths of the humiliation that the universe has to offer, all of it. He swam to the depths that everything our world, everything this universe can offer on a sinful level, on a humiliating level, God himself experienced that humiliation, all that this world has to offer, so that he could give us all that he has to offer. That's the story of the cross.